Husband cut off his toxic mom and sister after they demanded. We give up our dream home for my jobless SIL, her deadbeat husband, and their 6 kids. My wife's family had always been a mess, but I never thought it would come to this. The final straw was when my mom and sister had the nerve to demand that my wife and I give up our dream home so my unemployed sister, her lazy video game addicted husband, and their 6 kids could move in. That was the moment I decided I had had enough. Growing up, my mother treated me like I was the center of the universe. I was her golden child, the one she leaned on for everything, while my sister Emily always seemed to be an afterthought. I knew that deep down my mom loved both of us, but she made it painfully clear that I was her favorite. Emily must have felt it too, which is probably why I always tried my best to be a good older brother, looking out for her whenever I could. But the problem was that my mom and Emily didn't just act entitled, they acted like they owned me. The things they did were downright absurd. Take, for instance, what happened when I first started dating my wife, Lisa. At the time, I had just graduated from college and was still living at home. My parents owned a large house, and they had given me the entire basement as my own space, complete with a separate entrance. They said it was so I could have some privacy, and I thought that meant I could have a life of my own. Boy, was I wrong. Lisa and I had been seeing each other for a while, and she would occasionally stay the night at my place. But that didn't stop Emily from barging in whenever she felt like it. I mean, she wouldn't even knock. She would just stroll in like it was nothing, even early in the morning, completely ignoring the fact that my girlfriend and I were sleeping. Sometimes we weren't even dressed properly, and she'd just stand there, acting like this was totally normal, talking about whatever nonsense was on her mind. Lisa was understandably uncomfortable. Who wouldn't be? She tried to be polite at first, but after a few times, she pulled me aside and told me that unless I put a lock on my door, she wasn't coming over anymore. And honestly, she was right. So I installed a lock. And the next morning, like clockwork, Emily tried to barge in again. When she realized the door was locked, she lost it. She started banging on the door, shaking the handle, demanding to know why I had locked her out of her brother's room. I finally opened the door and she stormed in, glaring at me. "Why the hell did you put a lock on this door?" she snapped. Before I could even answer, her eyes landed on Lisa, still in bed, and she pointed an accusing finger at her. "Oh, so this is her fault," she spat. "You put a lock on the door because of this tramp?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lisa was shocked. I immediately shut that down, telling Emily that I had installed the lock because I wanted my own privacy, but she refused to listen. She kept yelling that we were siblings, that we shouldn't have secrets, that I was choosing some random girl over my own sister. Lisa, not being the type to fight, just got up and excused herself to the bathroom while I tried to calm Emily down. Eventually, she stormed off, and I promised Lisa that I would handle it. The next weekend, Emily gave Lisa a half-hearted apology, saying she only barged in because she needed to talk to me urgently. It was a weak excuse, but at least she was pretending to be civil. I made it very clear that she was not to interrupt us again, and she nodded. But something about her expression told me she wasn't done stirring the pot. And I was right. Emily had this weird obsession with my relationship. Anytime Lisa and I had a disagreement even over something stupid like a movie choice, Emily would immediately chime in. "You know, Jason, you should really be with someone who actually shares your interests," she would say with a smug little smirk. "Not someone who clearly doesn't understand you." It did not stop there. Whenever she and Lisa were alone, she would start digging into Lisa's past, asking invasive questions like, "So why did your ex break up with you? Were you not good enough for him?" Or she would make nasty comments like, "Wow, my brother's ex-girlfriend was so much prettier than you." At first, Lisa tried to ignore it, but after weeks of these little digs, she finally snapped. One day, when Emily made yet another passive-aggressive comment, Lisa fired back, "Well, at least my ex's family wasn't as nosy and overbearing as yours." That shut Emily up real quick. She looked completely stunned, like no one had ever dared to talk back to her before. For the first time, she had nothing to say. But Emily wasn't the only one in my family with issues. My mother Claire was just as bad. At first, she just ignored Lisa, pretending she didn't exist whenever we were in the same room. But once she realized that Lisa and I were serious about each other, her whole attitude changed. Suddenly, she acted like Lisa was trying to steal me away from her. She would go out of her way to exclude Lisa from conversations, act as if she wasn't even sitting at the dinner table, and give her the cold shoulder at family events. I started noticing it too. I would call her out on it, and she would just brush it off, saying things like, "Oh, I just forgot she was there." Lisa, being the kind-hearted person she is, tried to let it go, but the final blow came when she overheard my mom talking about her. She is so stuck up and spoiled, my mom had muttered to my aunt one night when they thought Lisa wasn't around. She went to some fancy private school. What does she know about real life? Lisa told me later that she had overheard the entire conversation, but she never said a word to my mother about it. She just smiled through it, acting like she hadn't heard a thing. But I knew. And that was not even the worst of it. I found out later that my mother actually tried to talk me out of marrying Lisa. She sat me down one night and told me to keep my options open, as if Lisa was just some passing phase. When I ignored her advice and proposed anyway, she and Emily completely lost their minds. They actually called Lisa's, called her and tried to convince her to break up with me and give me the ring back. "You are making a mistake," my mother told her. "If you really love Jason, you will let him go." Emily, of course, chimed in with her usual bullshit, calling Lisa a gold digger and saying I deserved someone better. Lisa refused to entertain it. She told them point blank that she loved me and was going to marry me, whether they liked it or not. And when they realized they couldn't convince her to leave, my mother completely changed her tune. "Fine," she said with a forced smile, "but you better be the perfect wife. You better take care of him like I have." The audacity of that woman. Lisa and I thought that would be the end of it, but it was just the beginning of their insanity. There were plenty of moments when I could have walked away from my family, but the real breaking point was when my mom and sister demanded that my wife and I give up our home so my sister, her deadbeat husband, and their 6 kids could move in. That was the day I decided I had enough. Growing up, my mother, Brenda, always put me on a pedestal. I was the golden boy, the one she showered with attention, while my sister Ashley was treated like she was just there. Brenda loved both of us, I am sure of that, but it was clear who her favorite was. And Ashley, she must have known it too. Maybe that was why she always tried so hard to pull me back into the family, to make sure I never slipped away. But the things she and my mom did were downright insane. Lisa, my wife, saw it from the beginning. Brenda never liked Lisa. She barely acknowledged her existence at first, acting as if she was just some temporary inconvenience in my life. But the second she realized I was serious about Lisa, she went from ignoring her to treating her like a threat. She would make snide remarks, little digs at Lisa's background, questioning her upbringing, her education. I remember once she flat out called her spoiled because Lisa's parents had sent her to a private school, while Brenda had spent her whole life working as a public school teacher. But the worst thing she did? She actually tried to talk me out of marrying Lisa. One night, she sat me down and told me I should keep my options open. She said Lisa was not the right kind of woman for me, that I could do better. I ignored her. When I proposed anyway, Brenda and Ashley absolutely lost their minds. They called Lisa's, called her and told her that she should give me back the ring because she was making a huge mistake. "If you really love Jason, you will let him go," my mom told her. Ashley, of course, was even nastier about it. She straight up told Lisa that she was a gold digger and that I deserved someone of my status. Lisa refused to entertain their nonsense. She told them point blank that she loved me and was going to marry me whether they liked it or not. When they realized they could not convince her to leave, Brenda pulled the ultimate manipulation move. "Fine," she said, forcing a fake smile, "but you better be the perfect wife. You better take care of him just like I have." The audacity of that woman. Lisa and I had already made the decision to pay for our own wedding, so when Brenda suddenly offered to cover half of the expenses, we declined. We had worked our asses off to save for this, and we wanted to do it on our own. Instead of being happy for us, Brenda got upset. She went off on a whole speech about how sad it was that I did not need her anymore. Meanwhile, my dad, Frank, just sat there, nodding in approval at our independence. Unlike my mom and sister, he never had an issue with Lisa. He actually seemed proud that we were making our own way. To smooth things over, we compromised by letting Brenda plan the rehearsal dinner. It seemed like a harmless task, something small she could take control over. She agreed, and we thanked her for it. Then, as the wedding approached, things took a turn for the worse. First, Ashley invited herself over for dinner. She told me she missed me and wanted to spend time together. And, like an idiot, I believed her. Lisa was hesitant, but she agreed to be polite. That night, we were sitting at the table eating, when Ashley suddenly blurted out, "You know what I hate? Cheaters. They're just disgusting, worthless people." Lisa and I looked at her, confused. Then, out of nowhere, Ashley turned to Lisa and sneered, "So, tell me, how does it feel to be one of those worthless people?" Lisa's eyebrows shot up in confusion, and that is when Ashley pulled out a stack of photos and slammed them onto the table. I grabbed them and flipped through them. There were pictures of Lisa and one of her coworkers, Evan, just casual shots grabbing coffee, standing outside their office, walking into a restaurant with a group of coworkers. Completely harmless. Ashley, however, was acting like she had just caught Lisa in the middle of an affair. "I got you, Lisa," she said smugly. "You thought you could fool my brother, but I caught you red-handed." I felt my blood start to boil. Lisa was shocked, but also furious. She did not need to defend herself because I already knew the truth. Evan had a girlfriend. Lisa had always been upfront with me about her coworkers. And unlike my crazy sister, she actually had respect for our relationship. I put the photos down and turned to Ashley. "Why the hell are you following Lisa around and taking pictures of her?" I demanded. Ashley's smirk disappeared. "I was just protecting you," she said, her voice suddenly smaller. "She is not from our world, Jason. She does not belong with you. I was making sure she was not using you for your money." My hands curled into fists. "You are seriously spying on my fiancée because she is not from our world," I repeated. "You sound insane, Ashley." Lisa finally spoke. "You know what? I am done with your games," she snapped. "You have been trying to get between us since day one, and now you are stalking me? Taking pictures of me without my consent? You better hope I do not call the police." Ashley turned pale. You would not," she stammered. Lisa crossed her arms. "I have all the proof I need," she said. "You followed me, took my picture without permission, and tried to spread lies about me. If I press charges, do you really think a judge will just let it slide?" Ashley looked at me, hoping I would back her up, but I did not. I stared at her, disgusted, as she tried to justify her actions. "Jason, please," she whined. "I did this for you. I just wanted to protect you." I shook my head. "No, Ashley," I said firmly. "You did this for yourself, and you better be grateful that Lisa is willing to let this go. Stay out of our relationship." Ashley opened her mouth to argue, but she must have seen something in my face, because she shut it just as quickly. Since that night, she and Lisa have barely spoken. I still have a relationship with her, but Lisa, she is done with her, and I cannot say I blame her. But as bad as Ashley was, Brenda was about to prove that she was even worse. I told Ashley straight up that her situation was her mess to fix. Nobody was going to save her from this, and I certainly was not going to help. She looked at me, her eyes darting toward my brother, hoping he would step in. But to her surprise, Ethan stood by my side. He told her she should be grateful I was even giving her the chance to walk away without consequences. Ashley had no other choice. With a sour expression, she begrudgingly agreed to stay out of my life. Since that day, she and I have not spoken a single word to each other. Ethan still keeps some level of contact with her, but she never dares to speak to me again. But Ashley was not the only problem. The next big disaster happened right before our wedding, and this time, it was my mother Brenda who went full-on crazy. Brenda had insisted on handling the rehearsal dinner herself. Ethan and I offered to help multiple times, but she refused. "It is my job as the mother of the groom," she had said. "I will take care of everything." Well, we arrived at the venue that evening, and let me tell you, it was a joke. Picnic tables covered with cheap plastic tablecloths, cold Mexican food sitting out in the open, and Brenda sitting there with a face like she had been forced into hard labor. Throughout the night, she kept sighing dramatically, complaining about how she could not wait for this wedding nonsense to be over. Keep in mind, she had not contributed a single dime to the wedding. She had zero responsibilities, yet she acted like this was some massive burden on her life. And then she got wasted. She drank way too much and started acting completely inappropriate with our guests, slurring her words, getting too touchy with some of the guys, laughing way too loud at things that were not even funny. My dad, Frank, had seen enough. He finally walked over, grabbed her by the arm, and dragged her out of the venue. Ashley, of course, tried to argue on her behalf, but Frank shut her down immediately. I was mortified. That night, I told Ethan we had to uninvite both of them from the wedding. With the way they were acting, there was no doubt in my mind they were going to ruin our big day. Ethan refused at first. "My dad will be there," he argued. "He will make sure they behave." I did not buy it. I told him straight up, if he did not uninvite his mother and sister, there would be no wedding the next day. Ethan just stared at me, completely taken aback. I knew I sounded extreme. Hell, I even felt bad saying it out loud. But I was not about to stand there like an idiot, pretending I did not know exactly what was coming. I had already seen them embarrass us at the rehearsal dinner was. I really supposed to take a chance that they would act any differently at the wedding? Ethan sat in silence for a long time before finally nodding. The next morning, he called Frank and told him that Brenda and Ashley were no longer welcome at the wedding. Frank did not even seem surprised. "Do not worry," he said. "I will make sure they do not show up." And just like that, it was done. But of course, Brenda and Ashley did not go down quietly. They blew up Ethan's phone, calling over and over, trying to convince him to let them come. Brenda cried about how I was stealing her son away, calling me manipulative and a terrible woman. Ashley tried to play the guilt card, saying, "Ethan, you know Mom and I just want what is best for you. How could you do this to us?" But Ethan stood his ground. "I do not want either of you there," he told them. "Not after the way you have treated my fiancé." I will admit I felt bad that Frank could not be there because of them. He was a decent man, and I knew this probably hurt him. But any guilt I had disappeared completely when one of Ethan's cousins spilled the truth about what had really been planned. Apparently, Brenda and Ashley had been plotting to wear white dresses to our wedding. They had even started a group chat with some of the other female relatives, encouraging them to do the same. The bride should not be the only one in white. Ashley had written in the chat. The level of petty was unreal. After finding that out, I was beyond relieved that they were uninvited. Ethan missed them, of course. Despite everything, they were still his family. But he also understood that they had done this to themselves. And in the end, our wedding was amazing. Perfect. No drama, no interruptions, just a day filled with love and happiness. Since then, Brenda and Ashley have completely cut me off. They only reach out to Ethan on special occasions, which I honestly do not mind at all. Frank, on the other hand, has stayed in touch. He and I still talk occasionally, and he has been nothing but kind to me over the years. And now, here is where the real insanity starts. Ethan and I spent the next few years saving every penny, and this year, we finally bought our first home. It was a huge milestone for User Dream House, something we had worked so hard for. His family came over for a small housewarming celebration, and to avoid the inevitable awkwardness, I went to visit my parents while they were there. Then, out of the blue, I got a phone call from Brenda. At first, I was stunned. We had not spoken since the wedding, and now she was calling me like nothing had ever happened. She asked me casually about my life, acting like we were old friends catching up. I played along, answering her questions, though I was already suspicious. And then she dropped the bombshell. "So," she said, "how does it feel to live in such a big house with just you and Ethan?" Her words stung, because she knew. Ethan and I had been trying to have a baby for years. But due to fertility issues, we had accepted that we might never have children of our own. She knew this. Everyone knew this, and she was using it against me. Then, as if that was not bad enough, she followed it up with, "Ashley is pregnant." Again. I almost dropped the phone. Her sixth child. Ashley's husband, Chad, was jobless. A man who refused to lift a single finger around the house. He sat around playing video games all day, while Ashley ran herself ragged, working multiple part-time jobs to support the family. And now, Brenda was telling me this why? Well, she did not make me wait long to find out. "Since Ashley is expecting," Brenda continued, "she will not be able to work much longer. And well, since you and Ethan have such a big house and do not have kids, I thought it would make sense for you two to let Ashley and her family move in with you." I was speechless. This woman had not spoken to me in years, and the first thing she says when she finally reaches out is to ask us to hand over our house. It was official. She had completely lost her damn mind. Ashley was out there working 2, sometimes 3 part-time jobs just to keep the lights on, while her husband Chad spent his entire day glued to his gaming console like some overgrown teenager. No amount of talking, reasoning, or straight up begging from family members could convince her to leave him. It was like she had completely accepted her potato work herself to exhaustion while Chad lived in his fantasy world of video games and laziness. And now, Brenda thought I should be the one to fix this mess. She told me, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, that since Ashley would not be able to work much longer during her pregnancy, it only made sense for Ethan and me to give up our house because, in her words, "It is too big for a childless couple like you two." I literally choked on my own breath. I asked her if she was joking, but no, she was dead serious. She went on to explain that Ashley and Chad deserved to live in a bigger home, and since Brenda's place did not have room for them, she had decided that they would just move in with us instead. The weight of what she was saying settled in, and I could feel my entire body burning with frustration. I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained that this was our house, a house we were still paying for. The idea of someone else moving in uninvited, as if we were some kind of charity, was beyond ridiculous. But Brenda would not back down. She smugly told me that she had already spoken to Ethan about this, and that he had agreed to it. I nearly laughed out loud, because I knew for a fact that if Ethan had even considered such a thing, he would have told me immediately. We never made major decisions like this without talking first. I told Brenda flat out that Ethan could not make that kind of decision alone because this house belonged to both of us, and no one was moving in unless we both agreed to it. To compromise, I said that Ashley and her family could stay for a few days if they really needed Tobot moving in permanently. Absolutely not. That was when Brenda lost it. She started yelling, going on about how as a good daughter-in-law, it was my duty to make space for my husband's family. She even threw in the most ridiculous line I had ever heard, that if I agreed to her demands, all of our past issues would magically be forgiven. I was so done at this point. So, with the biggest smile on my face, I gave her a response that shut her up immediately. Asterisk. Sure, I will be happy to let them have our place. But you see, we are still paying for this house, and I know that if Ashley and her husband move in, they will not be helping us with the mortgage or the bills. So I think you should take some responsibility and help pay for Ashley, her husband, and her 6 children to live in our house. I will be happy if you can just cover the mortgage for us, and we will take care of the bills. I know that you will not be able to afford the mortgage with just your one job. So tell me, when are you getting a second job to pay off the debt? There was silence. Then, Brenda erupted like a volcano. She started screaming, completely outraged that I would even suggest such a thing. She called me ridiculous, saying how dare I ask her to help pay our mortgage. And I, still smiling, told her that it was just as ridiculous for her to expect us to take care of her daughter's family. That sent her into a rage. She kept shouting while I sat there, feeling nothing but satisfaction. She finally hung up on me when she realized that I was not going to cave. Not 10 minutes later, Ashley called me furious. "How dare you!" she screamed the second I picked up. She accused me of disrespecting her mother, called me selfish, and then went on her usual rant about how she had always known that I was just a gold digger. I let her finish. Then I said calmly, "Ashley, if there's a gold digger in this family, it is not me. It is you, the one who is trying to live in someone else's house for free." That shut her up real quick. And if you really want to see who the biggest gold digger is, I continued, maybe you should take a look at your own husband, the guy who sits on his ass all day while you work 3 jobs just to feed your kids. Ashley went completely silent. I could hear her breathing heavily, like she wanted to say something, but could not find the words. "I do not care what you think about me," I told her. "You can call me names all day. But one thing is for sure. You and your family are never moving into my house unless you plan on helping with the mortgage." She snapped at me one last time, something about me being heartless and choosing money over family thin. She hung up on me too. And just like that, the tables had turned. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life. But still, there was this tiny feeling of guilt in the back of my mind. I sat there wondering, did I go too far? Which is why I came to Reddit. Was I wrong for standing up for myself? Turns out a lot of people had my back. And to answer the most common question everyone kept asking, why would Brenda even demand such a ridiculous thing from us? Simple. Brenda had always been entitled. Ethan had let this nonsense go on for far too long, and now it was time for a serious conversation. Brenda had spent years controlling Ethan's life, and Ashley? She was just a pawn in her game, blindly following along, desperately hoping Brenda would finally favor her over Ethan. And let's be real, Ashley had everything to gain from this arrangement. She could sit back, let us pay for everything, while Chad continued to do absolutely nothing. I was just waiting for Ethan to get back from his business trip so we could talk face to face. This was not a phone conversation. 3 days later, Ethan came home, and we finally sat down. I told him everything, and the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He was completely blindsided. The only thing Brenda had told him before his trip, that Ashley was pregnant again. That was all he knew. He had no idea she had demanded we give up our house. I looked him in the eye and told him, "You need to handle this. I am done." And for the first time, he agreed. Right then and there, he called his mother. And what happened next was better than I ever could have imagined. Brenda took it one step too far. After everything she had done, after years of meddling, controlling, and trying to ruin my relationship, she went there. She actually had the audacity to say, "Since you don't have kids anyway, you could help raise Ashley's. It would give you purpose." For a second, I thought I misheard her. But when I saw Ethan's face, I knew I had not. His whole expression changed. I had never seen him look at his mother that way before. His entire face went red. "You do not get to say that to my wife," he snapped, his voice shaking with anger. "You do not get to use something so personal, so painful just to get your way." Brenda tried to backtrack, but Ethan was not having it. "And you know what?" he continued, his voice rising. "You wonder why Dad does not want anything to do with Ashley anymore? It is because she has turned herself into a baby-making machine while letting that useless excuse of a husband do nothing to support their family." Brenda's jaw dropped. "I have tried," Ethan continued. "I have tried to have a relationship with you both, even after everything you have done to Lisa. But this is where it ends." Brenda started begging, her voice suddenly soft. "Ethan, please." "No," he interrupted. "This is our house. Lisa is my wife. If you disrespect her, you disrespect me. And I am done with both of you." And with that, he hung up the phone. Since that moment, Ethan has had zero contact with either of them. Frank, on the other hand, called a few days later. He had found out what had happened and was completely disgusted by Brenda's behavior. "I get it now," he told me. "I get why Ethan had to cut them off. And for what it is worth, I am sorry." I told him it was not his fault. That was 2 weeks ago. In that time, a lot of people suggested I install security cameras around the house, just in case Brenda and Ashley tried something stupid. So I did. And guess what? They showed up anyway. It was last weekend, and I was alone at home when I heard a knock at the door. I checked the camera and there they were, Brenda and Ashley, and they were pissed. I called Ethan immediately. "I will be there in 10 minutes, he said. I took a deep breath, then opened the door. "Let us in," Brenda demanded. "No," I said simply. Ashley crossed her arms, glaring at me. "You can at least have the decency to talk to us inside." I did not budge. "If you have something to say, you can say it from out here." Brenda's face twisted with rage. "You are heartless," she yelled. "You are selfish and greedy." I stayed calm. "This is our house," I said. "You do not get to barge in uninvited." Brenda kept screaming, unaware that everything was being recorded. Ashley then turned on me, pointing a finger. "You are breaking up this family for no reason," she accused. "You are too stubborn to see what you are doing." Then she smirked. "You know," she added, "not only are you a gold digger, like I always knew, but now you are taking my brother away from us too." That was when I decided I was done playing nice. "You might want to watch what you say," I told them both, "because everything you are saying is being recorded. And if you do not leave right now, I will be using this footage to get a restraining order against both of you." Their faces went pale. Brenda gasped. "You would not dare." I smirked. "If you are not off my property in the next 60 seconds, expect a legal notice in the mail." That was when they finally realized they had lost. Ashley backtracked immediately, saying I was overreacting and that it was not a big deal. And right at that moment, Ethan arrived. He walked up to the porch, looking completely calm, and stared straight at his mother. "What are you doing here?" he asked flatly. Brenda tried to hug him. He stepped back. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice cold. "Why are you here?" Ashley jumped in. "We knew Lisa was controlling you," she said, glaring at me. "She has brainwashed you into cutting us out, so we came to talk to her face. To face." I rolled my eyes. Ethan just shook his head. "Lisa is not the reason I cut you out," he said. "You did that all on your own." Brenda started begging. "Please, Ethan," she pleaded. "We are family." Ethan sighed. "You are right. We were family," he said. "But that ended the moment you tried to ruin my marriage." Brenda looked devastated. Ashley still had one last card to play. "You cannot do this to us," she shrieked. "You are choosing her over us." Ethan finally snapped. "Yes, Ashley. Yes, I am. Because Lisa is my wife. You have disrespected her over and over again, and I will not stand for it any longer. You are not welcome here. And if you show up again, we will call the police." Their eyes widened in shock. They had never seen him like this before. "Now leave," he ordered. Brenda's shoulders slumped. Ashley looked like she wanted to scream, but for once, she kept her mouth shut. Eventually, they turned and walked away. Since then, Ethan spoke to Frank, who was just as shocked as we were that Brenda and Ashley had gone behind his back to show up unannounced. "You were right not to let them in," he told us. And honestly, I know they will never dare set foot on our property again. And if they do, well, I already have the footage ready for my lawyer. Ethan has finally seen his family for who they really are, and I could not be more relieved. For the first time in years, I feel like we can finally live our lives in peace. Hopefully, this is the last update, because I am so ready to move on from this nightmare